KFAN.
Wild hockey may be on a break, but Wild Wednesdays are not. All day on this Wild Wednesday, you can use the TalkBack feature in the iHeartRadio app. Tell us who your Wild MVP is at the break, and winners will be selected all day for Wild versus Lightning tickets for the game on March 3rd. All the details, KFAN.com. Keyword contest. Get your Wild TalkBacks in.
Swedes playing very cheaply, I think, against Italy. And now they're paying for it. The Italians have a much-needed power play down 3-2 men's Olympic hockey. Welcome back to the second hour of today's edition of the Bumper to Bumper program. Barrero, Guardsy, and Kevin Seifert is still in studio with us. Speaking of speed skating tradition, texter Daniel sent this to me earlier. The zenith of speed skating in Minnesota was during the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And the location was Powderhorn Lake at Powderhorn Park in Minneapolis. Olympic speed skating trials were held there in 1936, 1940, and 1948. We need to update a little bit. I mean, that's a long, long time ago. However, more recently, Seifert reminds me of a speed skating name, correct? Minnetonka's own.
Yes, Randy Bartz. He was on I think it was the 94 Olympics when in the 5,000 meter relay, they got the silver medal. And so he's a local Minnesotan, born and bred, came back here, still lives here in Minnetonka. Oh. I think he did some TV work in future Olympics after the 94 because there's probably about 7 people in the world who know it well enough to be able to explain what's happening and to explain to the announcers what's happening. And so, yeah, he's one of us.
94 Lillehammer Games, and he was born in Roseville, probably in the shadow of the Roseville Oval.
That must have been it.
Did you cover?
No,
94?
Royce was 94.
Royce,
Lillehammer, yeah.
He probably knows him then, yeah.
And he was chasing down Nancy and Tanya that Olympics. He probably wasn't. He wasn't hanging out at the Oval.
There's
nothing better to cover. Through several Olympics was all that nonsense. That was the best.
I could be wrong, but there's definitely an Olympics documentary, and I thought it was the Kerrigan Tanya Harding one where they show a press conference, and there's much younger Royce.
Is that right? Yeah,
you can see it.
Was it the Kerrigan press conference?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Or one of them.
And shockingly, he was laughing during it. So
that was all. That figure skating was. Well, it had, it almost felt like every 4 years there was some controversy.
Well,
and that's what I live for. And that's what a lot of us
live for. That's why there were newspaper columnists in those days.
That's very, very true, Davey. Questions for Seifert, because we've covered a lot of quarterback stuff, but I do want to explore some other areas. 64686 is the Bradshaw and Bryant KFA and I should say text line. Wow, this is an interesting accusation. Or observation, LaFleur is more of a quarterback whisperer than KOC. The proof is in his quarterbacks.
Malik Willis?
Oh, yeah.
Well, there's no doubt. If people remember, I think the Packers 2 years ago, whoever they brought in to camp, I think it was maybe Sean Clifford or somebody to be Jordan Love's backup. It was so bad they had to go out and find somebody right before the start of the season, and it was Malik Willis was who they signed. And when Jordan Love got hurt that year and he had to play, it was just assumed that they were just going to get stomped. And he came up with a way to get him comfortable and to get him and to emphasize the things he did well. And it's unequivocally just a great job. And obviously Malik had to have that skill and ability in him, but they brought it out in him in a way that did not happen in Tennessee.
I've got an area away from the quarterback thing that I think is worthy of some discussion, because I don't know if you've weighed in on this. One of the theories that's been advanced regarding the general manager change is that, well, if you make that decision and you fire him, and keep all the scouts in place who he allegedly deferred to a lot anyway, is anything significant really going to change? Do you have an opinion on that, or a view or an analysis on it?
I still think, I think things can be significantly different because he kept, they've kept the scouting people in part because if you fire the general manager and all the scouts at that time, you're never going to assemble enough a decent enough group to go through a draft. So you pretty much had to do it. But Kwesi was still, the decision maker.
Yeah.
And so he even talked about at one point learning how to process the information he was given. And he kind of acknowledged that it took him probably longer than anybody would have wanted to happen, to know when to take that advice, punch the button when someone says, hey, this is a good player, or this is the guy we should draft, and knowing when to ask for more information, and knowing when the information he's being given is faulty in some way. And so,
or when to move down,
or when to move down, or not to. Maybe that was one of the ones where he did not take the advice of the scouts. And so that decision making is now being shifted mostly to Rob Brzezinski. And so, regardless of what information that is in front of you, everybody can look at information differently and make a different judgment, or ask or consider a certain person to be the final word in the room, whereas another person would think of another person to be the final word. And so there's lots of different ways that the same information can lead to different decisions, and I think that's why I'd push back on the idea that this is just going to be the same thing as if they hadn't fired him. Yeah,
if you're still the guy putting it together, there's a lot of different ways. Yeah. It's still you, and you got to decide when you're going to defer and when you're not going to defer, or how you
what the information means.
Exactly. Yeah, how you process it. The whole.
The scouts are not giving you a list and saying like this is who you should draft in the first round. This is who they're giving you evaluations, and then you have to synthesize and process and ask questions, and then ultimately create a decision-making tree for yourself.
Why are the Italians changing goaltenders? What did I miss, Garzi?
Honestly, I'm not watching.
I'm all confused.
I'm doing
I don't even know why it's the Olympics. It's the Winter Olympics. It's a big game. It's Sweden.
I'm America first. I'll watch it. It's America.
What is it? What does this goalie do? Is this the warm-up?
This is the warm-up.
How you warm up?
I sense maybe the other goalie got hurt or something, because this was very sudden. Unless... Did they just score? Did Sweden just score like 5 straight goals or something? Let's see what the score is. Is it still 3-2? Because if it is, it's still 3-2. So there must have been an injury, or maybe he's sick, or maybe he had to go to the bathroom. I don't know. But they did make a goalie change in the men's hockey competition. U.S. starts tomorrow, correct? I think our first game is tomorrow on the men's side.
Yes.
I'm not mistaken. Would you classify yourself... Given this matchup, are you more of a Swedish meatballs guy or an Italian meatballs guy, would you say, if you're forced?
I definitely Italian.
Okay.
It amazes me how many people, and this is going to just be bad, but how many people go to IKEA for the Swedish meatballs in the cafeteria? Are you one of those guys?
I don't know. I've ever
gone to IKEA just to eat in the cafeteria.
I can say, I believe... my memory's not great all the time, but I don't believe I have ever been in an IKEA.
Well,
that tracks.
Yeah, because the rest
assemble things yourself.
You have to bring the stuff home.
If that's the key to it, you're right.
Yeah, that tracks.
Yeah, for sure.
I think you could pay somebody, but no,
well, that's another story.
There's like a lot of there's this like underground cult thing of going to IKEA and eating their Swedish meatballs in the cafeteria. It's not the most expensive place in the world.
No, it's good value.
It's kind of like when you go to a casino and the beer is like 99 cents because they're trying to draw you in with that, and then
you buy the bunk beds for $1,000. Get a couple of meatballs.
But at least you got
a bargain on the meatballs.
You got Swedish meatballs for $3.99, and so
at least you can feel gross while you're assembling them later.
More power to all the people who really love it. It's not been something I've been able to get behind, and so that one's an easy choice for me.
I for many years subsisted on boil bags. Stouffer's boil bags. And one of the best was Swedish meatballs. They still make it.
Oh, yeah.
It's tremendous. That's what it is. I don't know if it's good for you anymore. I don't know how to decide. I'll leave it up to RFK Jr. He'll tell me.
Processing.
Well, there's a lot of sodium, that's for sure.
Well, I guess I'd have to be RFK the third because...
Yeah, that's true.
Isn't he RFK Jr.?
He's RFK Jr. Yeah, the current one. Yeah, that's exactly it. That's true. All right. If I left the table wide open for you on something else Vikings related that has nothing to do with the quarterback situation, and I'd say, let's explore it. Well, what's on your mind? What else do we need? Because there's obviously a lot of other open questions and concerns and a lot of questions that need to be answered elsewhere. So where else would you begin?
So I'm writing this week, and I'll give you a preview.
Good.
While the attention on the quarterback is totally, fair and placed well, another big thing that they're starting to do now, and they're going to have to do probably for a few years, is dig out from multiple bad drafts, basically. And so, and we've been talking about this for years here and writing about it as well, that it's just not sustainable to get so little production out of your drafts over time, because the NFL just doesn't have a structure for you being able to sustain with free agency and trading and other people's cast-offs. And so like the core of your team, your best players usually should come from the draft. And so there's a lot of places on the roster where in the normal order of course of things, you would expect and hope that there'd be some young players that are ready to step into bigger roles, and they just don't have it. And a perfect example is at receiver. They're paying Justin Jefferson $35 million. If you're still, behind Jordan Addison, that they're going to have to sign him to an extension at some point. And I think, that they're still behind Jordan Addison. And so that probably means that you can't bring Jalen Naylor back as your third receiver. And that's fine. It's not unusual in the NFL for a third receiver to go on free agent market and then get way too much money as somebody else's number one or number two receiver, for you to match that or offer him that to stay as number three. And so you would hope there'd be somebody to step in and put into that role. And they certainly didn't have any depth at receiver at the beginning of last season, when they felt they had no other choice but to use the equivalent of a 4th round pick to trade for Adam Thielen for a 3-game rental, basically. And the question is, do they now? They drafted Ty Felton in the 3rd round, and I think the 102nd pick overall. And he played like 40 snaps, had like 3 passes thrown to him. Really hard to know if usually if somebody's going to step into a significant role, you would have wanted to see him on the field a little bit more than that. And so right now, if you say, well, they're going to, obviously keep Justin Jefferson, they're going to still remain committed to Jordan Addison, and they're going to let Jalen Naylor go to free agency. If you still feel like that's going to be what happens, then are you going to trust Ty Felton to be your number 3 receiver, or are you going to have to go sign somebody on free agency or hope that you can draft somebody who's more ready to play than he might be? It might turn out that it's fine and it works out great, but you certainly would hope to have more information than you do about him to be able to do that. And there's a couple positions like that. They drafted a ton of cornerbacks over the years, and none of them over the 4 years with Kwesi, and none of them are still with the team. Unfortunately, one of them, Kyrie Jackson, was killed, but the rest, were just cut or traded. And so it's an absolute position of need, and has been for years. And they still don't have anybody, young on the roster that they can project as being somebody who's ready for a bigger spot. That's the case at safety. It's potentially the case at center. And so that's kind of like a few examples of where, like, when we always say, like, globally, you can't, the draft is the lifeblood of a team. You have to have consistent production out of the draft if you're going to be a consistently good team. But that's where it, specifically is coming home to roost for the Vikings.
This is from lawyer Tom. Why hasn't there been more talk about the Vikings offensive line problems and the effect of same on Vikings quarterbacks? Before I read the rest of this, I would say there's been actually a lot of conversation about O-line, but let me keep reading. 7 of 8 quarterbacks who have taken snaps under KOC have been injured. Max B is the only one who wasn't. It was discussed a lot before last season. They tried to address it with free agents and draft, but injuries meant way too many player games missed, and Vikings quarterbacks suffered, figuratively and literally. Isn't it worth contemplating what J-Mac could do with a decent line? At a minimum, will give him a chance to show he's not really injury-prone and will allow him to play more and presumably get better.
Well, they fired the offensive line coach, so they addressed it in a different way this year. So I think that deserves at least recognition in the conversation. Whether it works out or not is another story entirely. So, but it's not as if they're ignoring it. And with the injuries with JJ McCarthy, I know, and the Vikings quarterbacks in general, whether it was Carson Wentz or JJ or Max Broser, took a ton of sacks last year. And but the injuries, with Carson Wentz's shoulder injury happened when he was running and he lowered his shoulder into a Cleveland Browns linebacker in London. And so is that the offensive line's fault? JJ McCarthy, if you look at his injuries, the ankle was when he was running down sidelines. The concussion was when we think it was when he was running and got hit near the sideline. One of the first thumb injury he had, it was it's a little bit more difficult to explain, but he sort of stepped up in the pocket more than he needed to and hit it on the back of an offensive lineman. And then the fourth one was maybe just because there was pressure. So conservatively, 3 of the 4 J.J. McCarthy injuries, I wouldn't necessarily say were the offensive line's fault. That said, to run an offense well, you don't want to have pressure, and there absolutely were a ton of sacks. And that's something they need to look at. But in terms of them causing the injuries, it's hard to attribute it.
Is there, if we look at, I don't want to spend a lot of time on the Super Bowl because I don't think it was a particularly memorable game, but if we look at what Seattle did with Darnold, is there anything you believe in terms of the way, the kind of offense they ran or the way they used him that did contribute to him going further than he was able to go after having a terrific regular season until that last regular season game?
You mean things that they changed in the playoffs?
Or no, I'm just saying things over the course of the whole year, maybe either scheme or obviously a great defense.
He went from being to one of the NFL's past happiest offenses to arguably the NFL's most run happiest offense. And so, and Alec Lewis had the stats in his story the other day in terms of designed runs versus designed passes. And, it was quite literally night and day in terms of the spectrum that NFL offenses are on. So like the top line reason is that he went to an offense where he wasn't being asked to be quite the catalyst for moving the ball. I mean, the quarterback, by definition, no matter who he is or what the offense is extremely important and the most important person on the field. But in terms of the passing, the type of passing and the amount of passing, it just wasn't, they weren't asking as much of him.
And although he did in the title round, he played great in that
Rams
game.
Yeah, absolutely. Threw for 340 yards and didn't have a turnover in the playoffs at all. So when you get to the playoffs, quarterback play is going to be that much more scrutinized. And when he got there, he was lights out.
One of the things I got this season is, Darnold was also able to sustain it because if he'd stayed here, he'd have gotten killed because our line's no good and their line is great. Is it as simple as that, or is it also, like you say, usage and what you're asking him to do over a period of time that also all contributes to maybe a different outcome?
No, I would say their line is better. They drafted their left tackle a few years ago, and he just got a new contract, and he's great. And the guard that they drafted this year, Zabel, was really good. And so they definitely have done a good job of putting together a good young offensive line, and the Vikings have had to work a little harder to patch it together. So that was definitely part of it. And I think some other people have made this point as well, but just seeing the difference in Darnold in the playoffs with the Vikings last year and with the Seahawks this year, you saw, it definitely, he was under some pressure, but not nearly the pressure and was not nearly being asked, I guess I'll go back to to be quite the focal point, as he was asked here.
Will you be surprised if the Vikings come back for training camp next year with Aaron Jones as the number one running back?
Yeah, I think so. In terms, especially the number one running back. And I know Kevin O'Connell likes him, and I know everybody in the locker room likes him. I think last year, 2 years ago, they got 17 games out of him, even though a few of them, he was certainly not 100%. And then as he got a year older, he was kind of back to being on and off the field. And so I'm not saying there's not going to be a role for him, but maybe it'll just be flipped with Jordan Mason. But it seems like to go into the season saying, "Oh, Aaron, we'll get a healthy Aaron Jones this year," just seems like that's wishful thinking. Were you at all crushed on Super Bowl Sunday because your one assignment almost became irrelevant? The officiate? Yeah. It started off. I think the second pass of the game, Sam Darnold throws to Cooper Kupp, and it looks like he might have been bobbling it. And so I weighed in on that. We had a live blog going, and so I did wave in on that. But there wasn't even a penalty called until a few minutes before halftime, and then the second penalty was with 3 minutes to go in the third quarter, and so they did a good job. There was even the controversy about whether there was a particular play where the Seahawks were offsides or false start or what have you. And then if you looked at it frame by frame, they actually got that one right as well. And so it was a very good job. And that ultimately, when there isn't a controversy, officiating controversy, or you don't hear them talked about at all, then you know it was a well officiated game.
Seattle Rams, the real Super Bowl.
I mean, in terms of what actually happened, like probably the best two teams this year were those two. But in terms of the top two, I think the Broncos
could have been.
There was two extenuating circumstances with the Broncos in the AFC Championship game. One, obviously, the quarterback got hurt, and two, the blizzard that set in. Like whoever was leading at that point was going to win the game. Right. So it really wasn't that. If it had been tied at 10, if they had gone to kick the field goal earlier and it was tied at 10, they might have played 7 overtimes. Who knows how that game would have worked out. Nobody could move the ball, but again, like in the end, the Patriots won. Credit to them. They win. You go to the Super Bowl, but I feel like that was. That was not the number one team in the AFC versus the number one team in the NFC. It doesn't happen every year, but this year certainly wasn't.
By the way, should we rule out Wentz as the second guy?
In terms of maybe like if there was a wish list, I wouldn't say he'd be near the top. I think we saw basically what you're going to get out of him, and it wasn't terrible.
No,
but I think that they will start they would at least likely start shooting higher than what he would represent.
Lastly, this is Paul in Big Lake. I've never heard KOC take any heat for the Darisaw injury. You may not remember this, but it occurred against the Rams regular season game 2 seasons ago now. We were backed up against our own goal line, very little time left the first half. Game situation clearly dictated taking a knee. Instead, KOC decided to pass the ball, and that's when Darisaw was injured. I think we did explore it at the time, the debate, but
no, that's a fair discussion, and I would imagine that he might have thought some of those things too. When you're the play caller, you think about all the consequences. Was that a likely consequence of calling that play? No, because there was I think a missed block or something that contributed to it and made the running back go in a different direction. There was several things that don't often happen in combination that led to Christian Darisaw, even being near where the ball was. And so, that it was, certainly in hindsight, you can say, well, if they had just run the ball out that time, just not tried to play offense. They, right before the half, he wouldn't have gotten hurt. But I think there's some scrutiny there, and I think probably from Kevin O'Connell as well.
Do we feel like he's okay now, or is that an open question too? I mean,
I asked again. We talk about all bets are off. I asked Kwesi about that in his end of season thing, and he basically said we're going to have a better. Insurance. I don't know if the insurance was the word he used, but essentially he meant that. And I don't know how you couldn't, they keep saying he's healthy, he's fine. This was not a long-term thing. We fully expect, him to get over the hump. But the fact of the matter is the injury happened in October of 2024, and in December of 2025, he's basically getting shelved for the season. And so something has to get better than it was, or you can't, just the difficulty of not the primary thing, but the difficulty of even coming up with a game plan in terms of your blocking scheme, where you're going to line people up in terms of tight ends or who's going to have to help. If you don't know if Christian Darisaw is playing in a given week, that's hard, because no team in the NFL has a number 2 left tackle that's going to be able to do the same things as their number 1 left tackle, unless their number 1 left tackle is terrible. And so, frankly, it had a lot of downstream effects, and I can't imagine they want to go through that. And I doubt Christian wants to go through that again. And so that will have to get figured out. But at the very least, I think they'll need to come up with a better option than what they end up having to go to, if that exists out there.
Well, I'll be honest with you. Jeff in Monticello, he's unhappy with you.
What did I do?
Says, yes, you did discuss that. Jeff from Monticello brought that up the day after, and you poo-pooed it at the time. Did you poo-poo it? On Darisaw and on decision to not take a knee in that situation.
Well, I probably did, because it like I said, it felt like it was a series of events that occurred that you wouldn't necessarily think were likely to happen, and there was a very small chance of it. And so, does it deserve scrutiny? Yes. Does he deserve to be run out of town? No.
He hasn't forgotten it.
Well, that's fair.
The listeners never forget.
They should hold us accountable.
Just like readers.
They should. Readers. Yeah. We try to hold the coaches and players accountable.
Occasionally.
We don't do a good job of it if you read your text
spotty
line.
Yeah.
But we try, and so people should absolutely try to keep us accountable as well.
Enjoy the balmy weather heading our way. It's
beautiful
Close
out.
to 50, I think, by later in the week,
Lovely.
right? 47,
yes.
48 degrees.
Go sit on the porch.
It's a beautiful thing. Thank you.
Okay.
Kevin Seifert, ESPN.com. Kessler in about 1 hour.
Yeah.
Time to cue up the Winter Olympics music again. It's going to be a very busy day. I can tell that. Might as well milk it. Sweden has set a record, and the game's still going. Final minute now for most shots on goal in Olympic history, as in Olympic history when the NHL players are involved. 60, count them, 60 shots on goal against Italy. They finally pull away. They lead now 5-2 in the closing minutes, or closing now seconds of that preliminary game, first round game. U.S. men start tomorrow afternoon, I think, against Latvia.
Sounds right.
I believe that is our first game. And speaking of the Winter Olympics, have you seen this one? Some of these doesn't even seem possible. An athlete convicted of committing credit card fraud against one of her national teammates has won an Olympic gold medal for France in the women's 15-kilometer biathlon, beating her victim to do it. Julia Simon, 29, handed a 15,000 euros fine and a 3-month suspended sentence last October after she was found to have spent more than 2,000 euros on 2,000 euro card details belonging to teammate Justine Brazes-Boucher, also 29, who finished 80th in the same race. And to add insult to injury, as the winner, the gold medal winner, crosses the finish line, she puts her index finger to her mouth as in to shush somebody. She is saying, let me see if I can find the quote here. I put my finger to my mouth. It was for one person, and they know who because we had a talk. Ooh. But I won't tell any more about it. It is over. How about that backstory? You get nailed on a credit card fraud case, but in the end, so you got a teammate who was the victim. You win the gold medal in her event, and she finishes 80th. Now, she couldn't be shushing her, could she?
Maybe.
Oh, my God. Then that's deep, right? That's the kind of story that I don't even think
so much.
You can't make that up.
No.
That kind of thing happens. A third member of the French team, Lou Jamineau, won the silver. Simon, the winner, explained at the time that she found her actions incomprehensible and that she was working with a psychologist to understand what happened. The crimes were committed in 2021, but only came to light later after Simon had won the first of her 10 World Championship titles. So that's if you're a sports columnist for what would be the Paris newspaper that would come to mind?
The Parisian Times.
Whatever it is. This is gold. You're going, you can't ask for better elements to put together in the column. I mean, you can't blow that one. That column writes itself, doesn't it? Simon refused to talk about the conviction or a ban or anything except her gold medal. I'm just focused on my sport. It's the thing I love the most. I had a goal, put all my energy into it. Yes, it was a difficult month, but today was the perfect result for me. It feels like a dream. More background. Last year, one of her teammates, was this the one who was the victim? What's the name of the victim? No, I think this is a third person. This is going to be it's going to end up being a streamable series. One of the teammates revealed she had received death threats from a gambler who was furious about losses linked to her performances. Oh. And another member of the French team competing at these games, Jean Richard, was briefly excluded from the national squad after she was accused of tampering with a gun belonging to one of her teammates. Now, this is a biathlon, remember? That's unbelievable. I mean, how? It's going to be a series, isn't it? It's going to have to. That's another one I knew nothing about till today. In fact, kudos to a listener, and a very alert listener who dropped this in and had us look the thing up as well.
I watched the Michaela Schifrin moguls last night, by the way.
Where she, faded.
It just was, she was as Tirico said, she was, of the 18 that went, she had the 15th best time.
It's inexplicable.
And then they went back, they go back to like the host house, and the other American pair ended up winning a medal, or another American pair ended up winning a medal, which apparently was big time. Like one of them has been in forever.
Right.
And Michaela was giving essentially a toast to them and saying, there's no better way to finish this for you. We're so proud. We're so happy for you. She kind of looked over to her teammate, who she completely let down. Was like, I'm sorry we couldn't get it done, and then moved to the toast. Man. And so she was like smiling and happy, and this other teammate, you could tell, was just like
bitter.
Thanks a lot.
Wow.
Trying to gut through it. I'm sure she's happy for her teammates, but she's like, I mean, I'm paired with Michaela Schifrin and I can't win. I can't get a medal. She looks just devastated.
Yesterday, this just follows the pattern for Schifrin. It just has not gone well. Everything but the Olympics. She's tremendous.
Yeah.
And the Olympics, it's just been an utter and complete. I don't know if she has any more events. Yeah,
she does.
Yeah, I think she does.
But after the first one, where she won gold somewhere, I think that was Vancouver.
That's right. Yeah,
it's been
all downhill.
A little messy,
pretty much ever since. That's for sure. 64686 Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line.
Can I give the grand in your hand bonus bucks keyword because I missed it on the Seifert break? Credit is the 4:00 hour for bonus bucks. It's our national cash contest. Go to KFAN.com and enter the keyword credit.
All right, we'll get caught up. I've got one A-section item. We've got top 5 at 5 yet to get to, including, I'm assuming, a preview of the Wolves' last game before the All-Star break tonight, right here on the Fan. And then we'll prepare for Kessler in the 5:00 hour. Sweeney's guy has checked in. Sounds like that French gal likes swiping gold. Get it? Likes swiping gold.
This is the end, my only friend, the end.
You want a nightmare? Let me tell you a story.
Oh, boy.
One evening last summer, Donna Hughes Brown was handcuffed and led into a filthy holding cell somewhere in Kentucky, where insects crawled out of a drain and feces streaked the walls. The Missouri grandmother's life had taken an unrecognizable turn days earlier when federal agents pulled her off an arriving flight at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport, arrested her, and told her she'd be deported. For crime? Writing 2 bad checks for a combined total of less than $75 more than a decade before. Hughes Brown, a lawful permanent resident of the United States since she was a child, would go on to spend 143 days, almost 5 months in detention. She was only released at the end of last year after an immigration judge granted an application to stop her removal. Her story underscores just how far the Trump administration is willing to go in its quest to boost deportations, extending its dragnet to people who are legally present in the country with minor offenses from years earlier. In other words, the worst of the worst. More details that will kind of curl your nose hairs. Hughes Brown, 59, is an Irish citizen and green card holder who immigrated to the United States with her parents in 1978. It's almost 50 years ago. Before last year, she never imagined she would become a target of the administration's clampdown. She believed that everyone should come to the country legally like she did. Now back home in small-town Missouri, Hughes Brown said she thinks constantly of the women she left behind in detention. Jaime, a 25-year-old from Guatemala who is married to an American citizen. Grace, a woman from Venezuela with a congenital heart condition. Beata, a Polish green card holder with 2 convictions for minor retail theft more than a decade ago. Her story an echo of Hughes Brown. It was the intent for this to happen to so many people. It doesn't really matter how you got here. The end result is the same. Her ordeal began last July. She made her first overseas trip in almost a decade. Her aunt had died, so Donna and her husband, Jim Brown, traveled to Ireland. They gathered with family at a lighthouse overlooking an estuary as they spread her aunt's ashes. At the airport in Dublin, Donna and Jim pre-cleared U.S. Customs and Immigration. Officers pulled Donna aside to ask questions about her travel history. They then let her proceed to her flight. But as the plane was approaching Chicago's O'Hare, on the return, the flight attendant announced that all passengers would be required to show their passports as they exited. Exiting the plane, she saw armed officers waiting on the jet bridge, and they were there for her. After a night in the cell at O'Hare, Donna received paperwork explaining why she'd been apprehended. Back in 2015, she pleaded guilty to passing a bad check the previous year, a misdemeanor. The check was for $25, made out to something called Crazy Corner with K's, a gas station and convenience store. At the time, she was living paycheck to paycheck, didn't realize the check would bounce, she says. After it did, court records confirm, she paid restitution of $80 plus court fees of $117 and served a year of probation. Stabilized her finances, building a career as a home healthcare aide, certain that a chapter was closed. However, the government was not done. They also cited a separate 2012 misdemeanor. It's unbelievable. Conviction for passing a bad check. Records from that case are not available to the public because the case was either dismissed or expunged, a county official in Missouri said. The government, as a number of people point out, quoted in this Washington Post piece, has an immense amount of discretion deciding whether to exercise powers that are in place and whether to detain someone. In the past, the assumption would have been that DHS would have exercised its discretion favorably in a case like this. To assert that passing a bad check more than a decade ago makes you unworthy of living in the U.S., that's a policy decision, said one immigration attorney. The average cost to house an ICE detainee per day, $187, according to the most recent figures available. And at that rate, detaining Hughes Brown has cost taxpayers about $27,000. Let's fast forward to early August. Donna and several other detainees were handcuffed and loaded into a van for a 6-hour drive from Chicago's O'Hare to Campbell County Detention Center, a local jail in Kentucky that also houses ICE detainees. 400 miles from home, she lived in a pod with dozens of other women, sleeping on metal bunks with only a thin mat and toilets that were clogged for days. One of the women was Beata Semenkowicz, a lawful permanent resident from outside of Chicago who has lived in the U.S. since 1995. Federal agents had arrested her at her daughter's house in August, told her they were launching deportation proceedings. The reason, 2 misdemeanor cases for retail theft in 2005, 2011. Meanwhile, Donna's husband, Jim, he's doing everything he can through all this to get her released. They had met online, married 7 years before, building a life in Cyrene, Cyrene, a tiny town south of Bowling Green, where they keep 3 horses and are active in their church. after Hurricane Helene. They twice filled a 30-foot horse trailer with supplies, driving it to North Carolina to help disaster victims. A combat veteran turned CT technologist, Jim describes himself as a conservative Christian who voted for Trump in 2024. He's not against immigration. He grew up around migrant workers in Texas, hardworking people who paid taxes into the system. When Donna was detained, Jim wrote to every member of Missouri's congressional delegation to try to tell the story, see if anybody could intervene. He struck out, but he got help from an unexpected place, a representative out of Rhode Island, a Democrat who represents Rhode Island, a guy named Seth Magaziner. Magaziner brought Jim to Washington to speak at a panel on Trump's immigration crackdown. At the event, Jim was asked why he had voted for Trump. He paused, because I was an idiot, he answered. Partisan backlash has been swift. He says longtime friends in the ruby red county where the couple lives have turned their back on him because he dared to criticize Trump. Meanwhile, more liberal neighbors have said his wife's ordeal is a fitting consequence of his vote. Jim says, my family and I have gotten hell from both sides. In December, Magaziner also asked Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem about Donna's case during a hearing on Capitol Hill. The Trump administration claimed it would target the worst of the worst, but no one understands how false that promise was more than Jim and Donna Brown, Magaziner said in a statement. Months roll by. Donna spends 2 stints in an isolation cell where the only book allowed was the Bible. She was permitted an hour outside every other day. Her requests to be released on bond were rejected, but on December 18th, after a hearing during which family members talked about how devastating her deportation would be, the judge granted her application to cancel removal proceedings, and DHS has since declined to appeal the decision. She does not intend to take any chances. Her passport and green card finally returned to her last week. I'm not even getting close to the border, is what she says. These days, she senses an awkwardness with friends. They're sorry for what happened to her, but still support the administration's efforts. That's their right, she says. She's not interested in cutting people off because they disagree with her, but she does want to talk to them about how helpless she felt in her darkest moments in detention, labeled a criminal, locked away, and unsure if she would ever return to her life in Missouri. She's determined to fight for the women she met there. I'm going to keep on keeping on because it is not right. It is not right. So there it is, boys and girls. That's what we're fighting over. That's the cause that is so important, apparently, to so many people, that we get the worst of the worst. How can you listen? And by the way, there are dozens of these stories. I picked this one today. I had 5 others I printed out. I stuck with this one because I thought it resonated the most. What are we doing? How does this make any sense? It should make the least sense of all to old-fashioned conservatives. So this government overreach, what are we doing? How does this make sense? How do we win on any level going after individuals like that? That's my done as a society for a day. Top 5 at 5.
Wolves' final game before the break, Naz Reid fined. And you know when a player gets traded or someone gets fired, you start to hear things about what may have happened. I have, I think, one of my favorite negatives about a player, and his name is Jonathan Kuminga, that you just can't quite make up.
This is a good one. I'm glad you added this to